Hi theory students. Today we're going to be finishing the chapter on chromatic modulations. We'll be looking at enharmonic respellings of the augmented sixth chord, enharmonic respellings of diminished seventh chords, linear progressions, and intentional harmonic ambiguity. First, enharmonic augmented sixth chords. If we have a dominant seventh type chord, that's A flat C, E flat, G flat, we can imagine that as a 5-7 in the key of D flat, or a 5-7 of 5 if D flat is 5 in the key of G flat, etc. We just know that that chord acts as a 5-7 to D flat. If we respell that G flat and instead spell it as F sharp, then we can reinterpret that as a German sixth in the key of C. Let me show you. Okay, so here's the 5-7, which we would expect to go to a D flat chord. Like that. But now, if we respell this, with an F sharp instead of a G flat, then it's a German sixth. Remember the German sixth, where the augmented sixth goes outward to 5 in our key? And in C, that becomes a cadential 6-4. And resolves that way. So now instead of going like this, now it goes like this. And it's ready to resolve to C minor there. So we see through the enharmonic augmented sixth that something that originally appeared to be in D flat could be respelled instead to take it to the key a half step away, C minor. That's very distant harmonically. Now let's look at enharmonic diminished seventh chords. The diminished seventh chord is made up of all minor thirds, and therefore it's symmetric. By changing the spelling, each note in the chord can take turns being the root. What I have over here, I will show you on a musical staff. So now, that's with B as the root, D is the root, E sharp is the root, F as the root, and the enharmonic respellings, the B, when it's now the seventh of the chord, is spelled as C flat. The F, when it's now the root of the chord, is E sharp. The A flat is now G sharp. That's so we don't have F, A flat, C flat, and E double flat. That's why we spell it this way. And then what's E sharp over here when it's the seventh of the chord becomes F. So this is now 7-7 of C. This is 7/7 of E flat. This is 7/7 of F sharp. And this is 7/7 of A. All of that coming from the same pitches. So it starts out as a 7/7 in one of these keys, can be reinterpreted as a 7/7 in one of the other keys. But there's more than this. In addition, we've learned that each diminished seventh chord can function as a common tone diminished seventh chord to 1, or a common tone diminished seventh chord to 5 in a major key. So let's go back to the B, D, F, A flat. So here we are, B, D, F, A flat. If we're going to reinterpret that as a common tone diminished seventh, the seventh of the chord will now be the common tone here in the bass, and here's B, D, F above it. We keep the common tone, move that and that up a half step. That goes up a third, and it's a common tone diminished seventh of A flat. So we can use this in the key of A flat as a common tone diminished seventh of 1, or in the key of D flat as a common tone diminished seventh of 5. So now, in addition to C, I'm adding the keys of A flat and D flat as well. What we would find out when I add the keys of A flat and D flat, this one would add the keys of B and E. This one would add the keys of D and G. And this one would add the keys of F and B flat. This is as a common tone diminished seventh of 1, and this one as a common tone diminished seventh of 5. Note that we can now go to each of the 12 notes on the scale: C, D flat, D, E flat, E, F, F sharp, G, A flat, A, B flat, and B, all from the same diminished seventh chord. What a flexible chord that is. So this was the point that I just made. If each spelling of the diminished seventh chord goes to 3 different keys, then by using each of those 4 spellings, the same sounding diminished seventh chord can go to each of the 12 pitches in an octave just by how it's spelled and resolved. So the diminished seventh chord can go anywhere. Okay, next topic, linear progressions. These are chords that really don't make much sense in a Roman numeral or functioning way, but come about from voices moving linearly, often by half step, and just so happening to form a triad or seventh chord. If the label doesn't seem to be meaningful at all, we call it a voice leading chord and label it VL rather than with a Roman numeral. Here's an example from a Chopin prelude. And this is in your book, in example 30.13. So in this passage in C minor, Okay, and follow this analysis. Here are the chords that we kind of know about. A 1 chord, 5 goes to 6. So if you want to call that a 6-6, you could, or that's just linear motion, 5 to 6. Now we get something that looks like B, D, F sharp, and A, but there's no function there for a minor 7th chord on the leading tone. With the A flat there as well. And now this one, G, B flat, and D, that's a minor 5-6, which we often see in descending scales. We get a chord here, A natural in C and G natural, that has no real function in C minor. And then we get a French 6th, A flat, C, D, F sharp. That French 6th goes to the dominant, and then when the bass steps down to the dominant 7th in third inversion. So in the meantime, this chord over there and that one over there don't have a harmonic function, but they fill in chromatically the motion to the French 6th and to the dominant. And if you look at the voice leading in the middle part, now that makes sense, even if the vertical chords don't make any sense in this progression. And that's the hallmark of a linear progression, that it makes sense this way, but not so much this way, even though it forms a triad or a 7th chord. And finally, the last concept, that of an intentionally ambiguous harmony. In the Romantic era, many composers avoided resolutions in order to keep the tension high and the fabric of the music going. By avoiding cadences, the flow of the music continues. Eventually, in a Romantic era piece, it resolves its ambiguities, or at least we hope it does. The most famous example of this is the opening of Wagner's opera Tristan and Isolde. And this is an example in our book also. So listen to the opening of the opera. We've moved from this, which doesn't appear to be anywhere really, to appoggiatura to a 5-7 of A minor. Wagner never gives us the resolution in A. Instead, the next progression takes us to 5-7 in the key of C major, and then (5-7) in the key of E minor. So you could see that Wagner is intentionally avoiding letting us know exactly where we are at any moment and having a strong cadence, and that's part of his technique. So in the 19th century, we often see a lot of linear motion like this as a way of avoiding cadences. That's the end of this chapter, but there's much more to be said as we analyze music. Thank you. That's it for today.